Welcome. This is the Public Relations Review podcast, a program to discuss the many facets of public relations with seasoned professionals, educators, authors, and others. Now, here is your host, Peter Woolfolk.
Welcome to the Public Relations Review and to our listeners across America and around the world. Our first topic today is the question of the value of the APR accreditation in public relations. What are the arguments for and against the APR certification? And second, our topic will be, are the lines between paid and earned media becoming more difficult to see? So we'll explore this today. My guest today is Gayle Falkenthal, president of the Falcon Valley Group Public Relations, and she joins us from the wonderful city of San Diego, California. Now, Gayle,
hey, Peter, stay classy.
Now, Gayle has spent 15 years as an award-winning broadcast editor and producer with KGO Radio, KPBS Radio, KFMB Television before transitioning into her public relations career. Gayle is noted for her expertise in crisis communications, media relations, media training, and strategic planning. She is a board member and past president of the San Diego Press Club, where, by the way, she was honored with an award for career excellence in public relations, one of the very few individuals to have that achievement. She is also a board member of the San Diego chapter of the Public Relations Society of America and belongs to many other notable organizations. So, Gayle, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much.
So as I opened up now, tell me from your point of view, what are some of the issues surrounding the APR accreditation?
Well, let's first make sure that all the listeners are familiar with what we're talking about. Accreditation in public relations, or APR, no, it has nothing to do with real estate in this context. This is a bar exam style program, if you will, put together several decades ago by the Public Relations Society of America, the preeminent professional association for public relations practitioners in the United States, to essentially test and measure your knowledge in public relations. It's a voluntary certification program. It's administered like a lot of other professional association designations by the Universal Accreditation Board, and it is open to professionals with a minimum level of experience and meant to demonstrate a certain threshold of competence and to be a mark of distinction, to distinguish you as an expert practitioner. Now, this is not a license, and as we both know, there isn't such a thing in our professional service arena as a license. We don't go get licensed as attorneys do, or even as accountants do, and certainly not even as certain contractors or medical professionals. So this is imprinting a way to measure just how much knowledge, skills, and experience a certain practitioner has. It's one more value measurement in the toolkit that goes along with higher education and some other continuing education tools that people can achieve. And I get asked a lot, I do hold an APR. Is it worth it? Why should you earn an APR? There's a lot of pros and cons, and it really is particular to your individual goals as a practitioner. It's not necessarily something everyone needs to do. It's not necessarily something everyone wants to do, and there are alternatives. A master's degree, for example, whether in mass communication or often a master's in business administration is a smart option for PR practitioners. But it does take some time. It takes some effort. There's a little cost involved, and you do have to maintain your paid membership in PRSA to maintain your APR designation.
Well, as I was listening to you, I was just thinking back, a number of people that I know and have achieved various levels of accomplishment in public relations, let's say maybe newspaper writers, reporters, TV anchors, those sort of people, because they are seen to know that the particular area may not have. Let's say they leave being a television reporter and become a PR person. Most people recognize them for that, so that might not be a hurdle for them. Let's say if they decided to want to join a large PR firm or become a private practitioner.
This is a designation that really is not an educational tool like a higher education degree would be. You're not earning knowledge. The APR is truly very much like a bar exam that tests the knowledge and the experience you already have. Mm-hmm. I often tell people who are feeling a little intimidated or find the studying daunting that it isn't so much about studying for this exam. It's more about organizing your thoughts and experiences around what you have already learned through a lot of hard hands-on trials. You need to have a minimum of 5 years experience. In my opinion, you're really much better off waiting until you have 10 or 15. And it helps philosophical and procedural structure to the day-to-day things that we do. In my case, the reason I decided to earn my APR was really to put those procedural underpinnings around my career, to make sure that I stepped back and understood the processes that guide us in this profession. Mm-hmm. You know, it's real easy for us to get bogged down in the little tactics we do every single day. This gives you an opportunity to go back and really put a structure and planning and thought process around what we do. And the exam is based in large part on the traditional 4-step public relations planning process, the one that we often refer to by the acronym RPIE, R-P-I-E, Research, Planning, Implementation, and Evaluation. Mm-hmm. And it tests all the factors that go into putting together, from start to finish an evaluation, a full public relations communications plan.
Well, as you said, I was just sort of thinking, because situations vary, and I think you mentioned the fact that perhaps minimum 5 years before you can take it, and perhaps more, and I certainly agree with that, because I certainly learned a lot. I basically started out indirectly by being in radio, a DJ, and that was not satisfying, so I went into talk radio, and that was altogether different in terms of the planning and being able to prepare for guests, so forth and so on, ask questions, blah, blah, blah. Next thing I know, I'm the media relations manager for at the national headquarters of the National Education Association. From there, I went on to be press secretary for the chairman of the House Education and Labor Committee. Along the way, I also picked up some TV production experience and grew from there and wound up also then working for the President of the United States. So I can certainly see that experience is critical. You know, it's one thing to pass all your exams in college as compared to actually being in the trenches and actually doing the work.
Absolutely right. And your path is so common, from broadcaster or journalist to essentially that first rung on the ladder, the public information officer or the media relations individual for a company. And media relations, especially 10, 20 years ago, could be a major part of a public relations professional's job. Mm-hmm. I know when I opened my own firm 15 years ago, that was probably 80% of what I did for my clients. That's changed considerably in a lot of cases, and something that we'll talk about a little bit later in this podcast. Media relations is becoming a smaller and smaller slice of the pie. Mm-hmm. And once you get good at that skill, which is a central skill for a lot of jobs, what you're then asked to do is to be a little more thoughtful, a little more deliberate, and a little more strategic about message dissemination, creation. What is the call to action? who are the target audiences?
Mm-hmm.
And how do you aim at them, speak and communicate to them, and get them to do what you want them to do? Because we always want them to do something. And that is where the overlay of the planning process starts to come into play and is something that we more thoughtfully deploy. And once you've started putting all of that together, this is what accreditation is measuring: a more thoughtful, strategic planning process that yields specific results measured and evaluated. Now, what does it get you? You know, what do you get other than somebody says, hey, you get to put those 3 little APR letters after your name? Do you get a swell handshake or trophy? Does someone write you a check? Well, you'll often read statistics that practitioners who have the APR earn more than non-accredited peers. Well, I'm not sure that that's causation. I wonder if that might not really be correlation, because you do need to be a bit of a senior experienced pro to take the exam.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, someone at a senior level is going to make more money. I think there is a much more important reason to get your APR. It's not the ability to be promoted. It's not the ability to make more money. It's the confidence you gain passing that exam, understanding that someone used measurement tools in the form of the exam and the other processes that go with it, the review board and so forth. It tells you, yes, I know what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm following well-established practices in my profession. And that extra boost of confidence that it gives you makes you that much better at your job. When people are counting on you to strategically advise them, the confidence with which you could deploy your advice goes way up. And that, to me, is the real difference that you gain with something like an accreditation.
Well, I certainly support your position on that, and it does make sense, because particularly in this day and age, particularly when people are looking at metrics of things as to how are you judging whether the return on investment was achieved, all those other things, and the various platforms that are available to you to reach the various and sundry audiences now. You really do have to have the skills necessary to accomplish those tasks.
Peter, you are so right, and I will admit on this podcast, our marketing colleagues do a far better job traditionally than we do. We've in the past done things like counted clips,
mm-hmm.
right?
Oh, yeah.
Counted clips, right? Counted hits or likes or shares. Well, those are indications that your campaign is doing the right things, but is it achieving the results? You can't tell from those things.
Mm-hmm.
Your audience can see all the tweets and posts in the world or read all the articles in the world and still never take the action that you want them to take, whether it's to purchase a product or service, donate to a cause, or vote for your candidate or initiative, or change their behavior, as in getting vaccinated or stopping smoking. We need to see those results and measure those results
mm-hmm.
and tie them to our messages. And that is something, thankfully, in the last 20 years, we've gotten far better at doing.
Well, that is a major part of putting together a plan as the key performance indicators. That you or the client, someone establishes exactly what they are. What is it that we want to find out from this project we're putting together?
And let's face it, these folks that write us a paycheck or write us a check because they've hired us as a contractor or consultant want to know if they're getting their money's worth.
Mm-hmm.
And it's in our best interest to prove, yes, you are getting your money's worth and we're a good investment.
Well, the other thing I notice about that, too, is that there also has to be some honest discussion, because a lot of times clients might not know exactly what it is they want, or the expectations might not be I shouldn't say within bounds, but maybe not quite acceptable. Let's say we'll find by doing this program, let's say they use an influencer. I want to have that influencer show me that they can have, let's say, 500,000 people buy our product. Well, that's not always going to happen.
Right. Every one of us is bound by time, by budget and resources, and we need to figure out, what does success mean? Mm-hmm. Is success a 10% increase in sales, a 50% increase in sales? Well, of course you'd like 50% increase in sales, but if you don't have the budget to spend to get there, you have to start at a more realistic level. And frequently, people like us are in the business of educating our clients or our employers. It's to, here's a realistic effort. Now let's do some very careful thinking, laser-like focus, and really pinpoint the audience that you want to reach more likely to take action. The two words that are the kiss of death in our profession is general public. Three of them. The general public. Who's your audience? The general public. Really? Well, let me think about that with you for a minute. Is the general public my 13-year-old nephew and my 85-year-old mother? I don't think so.
That's right.
So let's narrow that down. Is the general public for your local restaurant people that live 3,000 miles away? Well, maybe it is if you're a significant tourist destination, but probably not. It's probably going to be people in a half-hour driving radius. So we start narrowing the audience way down, and then we know how to spend those limited resources we have as far as time and budget and talent, and make sure we get those results. And this is all part of the process that you really start to put together in a more strategic way. And people in business, especially, expect that of their employees, and they're beginning to expect it of us. Mm-hmm. So the accreditation platform gives us something to aim at, knowing this is the standard to which we're being tested, and helps you develop your career. Now, having said that, for many practitioners who really need the opportunity to gain the knowledge in the process, that's where considering a master's degree or an MBA might be a better road if you have the time, if you can afford it. Mm-hmm. The absolute ideal situation is to get that master's degree, and while you have developed that muscle memory for studying, for the topic, for really immersing yourself at a certain level of the profession, as soon as you finish that degree, double it up and pursue your accreditation. You're already studying a lot of the same things, and it is a lot easier to do it as a 2-for-1.
Mm-hmm. Just adding, one of the things that you did say in terms of developing a good, solid plan, part of that should also be making sure that people understand about controlling expectations so that people don't think too far out of the box or expect the world on some sort of a meager budget that they might have to offer or work with.
Right. Haven't we all heard those words? Well, is that all? Is that all we did? Is that all we got? Mm-hmm. Let's have that conversation. The more open communication and realistic look to make sure that the client and the employer understand that we want to get the best possible result out of whatever they've got to work with. Now, it is possible to just simply have too little to work with. Mm-hmm. And I have had clients, one in particular who comes to mind, who had a wonderful product and a startup business. But the truth is, hiring me was premature. He really needed an expert sales executive to start selling the product and start getting it out in the marketplace where it was being used and tested and pushed on every day before we had a public relations message to start talking about. So I fired myself. And it was the right thing to do.
Well, this sounds like maybe an excellent place to make that transition now into the differences in paid and earned media. because having a product available, you can go both routes on that one, paid media as well as earned media, if it's done right.
Absolutely right. So we've started applying the terms in our business, originally coined by the wonderful public relations pro Ginny Dietrich, in what we call the PESO model. And boy, don't we love our acronyms in this business? Let me tell you.
Sounds like
so the
the
PESO
federal
model,
government.
Yeah, we love them. Second only to the military, I think. So the PESO model envelops the 4 general types of media that we work with in messaging. PESO, P-E-S-O, paid, earned, social, and owned. Paid is advertising, anything we pay for space or time, traditional ads, marketing. Earned media is generally news coverage, but it has been also broadened to reviews, online reviews, and other types of third-party endorsements, which we've always seen news coverage as covering. So S, social, very easy to figure out. And owned is anything where we control the platform. Your number one owned media is your website. You might have a YouTube channel. A podcast can fall in that category, but we have to be careful that if the platform that you're on disappears, you still have another way to get it out to the public.
Well, newsletters
your website
as well.
You always own. Social, you don't. If you've got a robust Instagram account, I don't think it's going to happen tomorrow, but if Instagram decided to shut down and go out of business tomorrow, there wasn't a darn thing you could do about it. So that's where it falls in the category outside owned media. So we've always had a priority, as we were talking earlier, about seeking news coverage. News coverage is always the gold star, the brass ring. Let's throw in a couple of other cliches. We wanted our clients and our employers to be covered in the news so that our prospective clients or donors or supporters would see it. And the news coverage by the independent third party journalists or the broadcasters conferred that, sort of that imprint of, what am I looking for?
Acceptability.
It was your acceptance. It was your endorsement. It was this third party look at what you were doing, saying, yes, this is important enough and of value enough to get on the news. But we've seen a massive, massive change in the media landscape in the last 10 or 15 years. We all see what's going on with our local newspapers. It's devastating to a lot of our communities. The layoffs and the cutbacks have been enormous in broadcasting. The places that you and I used to work are barely holding on, some of them. We're lucky that there are still robust stations in certain markets and newspapers, and there are certainly some terrific national and international news operations. But the fact is that journalists, many of them have been laid off. And the ability to get into news coverage, the ability to get earned media is tougher and tougher and tougher. And heck, a lot of them are becoming public relations people like we are. So we can't exactly fault them for that.
Well,
that does mean that we can use our owned media to tell our own story, but you still need outside channels to reach your audience.
I agree with that.
Many of these people Yeah.
I was about to say, I certainly agree with that. And one of the challenges then for a good PR person is to be creative, as I just said, how to, get into that earned media. It does take some skills, and it's more than just sending a press release. There might be a wee bit more to it, so that you can interest that particular reporter to come take a look-see and eventually write something about your project.
Absolutely. The competition among us to get that precious reduced time and space is fierce. There are fewer and fewer reporters, editors, photographers to get the job done. The one thing we can do is help them by producing a lot of the material ourselves.
Absolutely.
In the day when I worked as a television producer and editor, there was no way we would have accepted outside video from any organization other than video we could not otherwise shoot ourselves. And that fell into two very narrow categories. Law enforcement or the military, where we just simply didn't have access, or babies born at the zoo in San Diego. We'd take the cute babies footage every time, and we'd take the Coast Guard rescue off the coast or a law enforcement action of some kind. But a biotechnology company, no. Product or service provider, a meeting, a conference, no, not a chance. Now they will. Now they absolutely will. And that can be the difference in getting your news coverage or not, because you have done the shooting for them. But there does come to a point where the earned media availability is just not there for you. It's just not there. And the stations and the print and the online folks know that too. And they've figured out ways that they could give you some access, but what it means is they bring on personnel that cost them money, and they're going to turn around and offer their services to you to get on, but you're going to pay for it. Now, a lot of us remember the old advertorials that would be in newspapers and magazines. They might not cover your news, your organization, your company, but they'd say, well, now if you're willing to pay for advertising space, we can make it look like it's a news article. But their ethical obligations required them to clearly label that it was paid for. So it would say paid advertisement, often fairly boldly around the edges, or advertorial, or sponsored by. There would be some clear indication. But it was still somewhat rare. In my area, you'd see real estate developments, housing developments, things like that would pay for advertorial space frequently, or restaurants, something like that. Car dealers would pay for what looked like independent car reviews, and they weren't. They were advertising. Today, for their mere survival, media are starting to, I would call it, lower their standards, but they're far more accepting of blurring the lines between the traditional news coverage, which we know today as earned media, and letting people contribute pre-produced content that they're paying to place alongside the earned media. First of all, it supplements their programming, it supplements their print content. And often it's of extremely good quality. And much of it is produced by people like you and like me, who used to do exactly the same thing on the journalism side of the aisle.
Well,
So
I still do write some
a proper story
things.
or a proper article. And we write or we shoot, produce that material just like we would if that station or that publication had hired us. But it's very difficult, frequently, for the audience to figure out the difference, because they're not always labeled like they used to be. And they often end up in places on the air, online, or in print that don't look a lot different than the news sitting right next to it, or that ran ahead of it or after it. I teach college students in media literacy, in public relations, and in marketing. And we use the PESO model, and we talk about earned media versus paid media. I will tell you, many of the 20 and 30-somethings that I teach can absolutely not identify the difference between paid advertising and news. They have no idea. Part of it is that people like you and I have gotten so good at this. Let's pat ourselves on the back and then turn around and blame ourselves for the problem. We can produce something that looks as informational and as third-party objective as a person who is still a full-time journalist would do. And if we give quality information, as we should, honest, facts as we should, it really is hard for our audiences to tell the difference. This is a dangerous time because it's very easy to manipulate the outcome and the meaning of that information people are looking at. Many of my students have now gone so far as to assume every single bit of news that they see was paid for by somebody. Paid for. That's astonishing to me. They've just simply, I believe, thrown up their hands and said, well, I think everybody just pays for all that stuff because most of it's paid for, isn't it? So all of it must be paid for. I'm just going to assume that. And they truly, truly believe it.
Well, that's when I would begin to ask a question.
How do they reconcile not having a third-party source of objective information?
Well,
I think critical in a democracy.
But there's also a responsibility on some people's part to try to think their way through this, and also read opposite. And all of the information shouldn't come from one single source. That's another way of beginning to make some judgments.
That's certainly true. The time is long past for us to require media literacy education very early for all of our citizens. And I would propose doing it in late elementary school or middle school. High school is too late. College is way too late for those who even attend. We can't guarantee we're going to get people there. And they do need to be good, skeptical consumers of what they're looking at. For example, another example that was a recent incident in my market in San Diego was a opinion columnist's column placed on the front page of the daily newspaper. And it said column above it. Inside the organization, inside the newspaper, the editors believe, well, everyone knows what a column is. Everyone understands that a column is opinion. Mm-hmm. I don't think they were sadly mistaken. That is not a common term outside their profession, certainly not anymore. And there was a massive amount of public outrage at the editors of the newspaper for permitting one of their reporters to produce such a one-sided article about this particular incident. And when they said, well, no, this was an opinion piece placed there to follow up our news coverage. They can't differentiate that. So we need to take responsibility for clearly labeling what is paid content and what that means, and what is earned media and what that means. And that's on us.
Well, let me also add to that, too. I think there's perhaps a real lack of critical thinking on our parts as well, because just reading it and then deciding, well, this is all, or everything is paid for, I think it's a bit too shallow in arriving at some decision of what is and is not. There should be a better way of people processing what it is that they read and how they read and where it's coming from to begin to make some decisions. And true, in some cases, it's difficult. One of the most difficult things I've seen now is the fact that how you can actually see a video of someone a famous person, saying things that you never would expect. They showed it on the news of Richard Nixon saying some things that, oh no, it didn't come from him. They've been able to master the techniques for making it look like he's actually saying these words.
Well, I understand that when somebody says, well, I just assume anything I see in the media somebody paid for, that's a cry of frustration by somebody who hasn't been educated, who hasn't been exposed or learned the difference. We need to start training people how to look at information, how to judge the sources appropriately, how to fact check. The information is there if they wish to do it. And they should, at the bottom line, have at least a general awareness of the differences, even if they don't want to comb through every single article, if they don't want to question every single story they see. And there are some media outlets who now have a very interesting approach to transparency, who provide a link or a fact check for every single statement of fact in their news coverage. ProPublica is starting to do this frequently, and I think that's a healthy approach. Not everyone can do it. It's very difficult and it's very time consuming, but with the work they do, it's proved to be very valuable. But it is time for us to start helping people as the information professionals we are, whether we're on the journalism side of the aisle or the communications, public relations side of the aisle. We're all really interested in the same thing. Spreading
the facts.
Truthful, factual information designed to help people take action.
Well, let me say I certainly support that. Now, and sort of rounding things out and heading for the finish line here, one of the things that I found out that was very interesting about you in terms of writing is that you also cover boxing matches. The sweet science, as it's called. How did that come about?
I do cover the sweet science. Well, when I started my journalism career, women didn't really cover sports. Well, maybe you could cover figure skating or gymnastics or something like that. And I love those sports too, but that wasn't really a viable career path for me. I transitioned out of broadcasting and out of journalism into public relations full time. But then about 10 years later, I had the opportunity to come back and start doing some journalism in the form of media criticism. But through a very strange opportunity where a door opened, I not only pushed it open, I kicked it open and blasted through it and ended up as a substitute sports columnist covering boxing. Now, I'd grown up watching boxing in a household with a very avid fan father, and I grew up in San Diego, which meant, back in the day, we could not only watch the fights, the big fights everyone saw in the United States, we could also watch television from Mexico, which we did, which is a boxing-crazy country. So here came this opportunity. I knew what I was talking about. I was fully qualified. I raised my hand and said, you know, you need a fill-in. How much worse can you do than nobody? Well, the gentleman who I substituted for never got his job back. And 10 years later, I'm still working in addition and on the side to running my public relations firm as a boxing columnist for a national online news organization, Communities Digital News. And I travel primarily in the western United States, Los Angeles, Las Vegas, those areas, which do hold a significant number of championship fights in the United States. So on probably 40 weekends out of 52 a year, I'm at a fight.
Well, let me say this.
I'm not fighting. I'm ringside at a fight. And it's a wonderful community, surprisingly. It's full of opportunities for storytelling. Nobody gets into boxing from an affluent background, or very, very rarely. Everyone has a fascinating story to tell. It's a worldwide melting pot. And if you love engaging with humanity, people from all walks of life different from you, it just couldn't be a more enjoyable hobby. And I do call it a hobby, even though I am a boxing writing professional.
Well, let me say this, Gayle. You have really provided us, first of all, a lot of very valuable information in terms of the accreditation process, exactly why it's important that people should at least consider it and pursue it. And, of course, the issue here of paid and earned media, which I think continues to be an issue that we'll continue to grapple with, and also enlightened us to let us know that you're an established, well-received boxing columnist. So I really do appreciate your being a guest here tonight.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity. It's been a pleasure, and I hope that there's some information to you, the listener, that gives you some things to think about, some responsibilities that you might want to undertake, and perhaps some goals you'd like to set for yourself in the near or long-term future. I encourage you to do it.
Well, Gayle, thank you so much. Gayle Lynn Falkenthal, thank you so very much for being our guest today. And again, thank you to all of our listeners for the Public Relations Review. And please join us for the next edition of the Public Relations Review.
This podcast is produced by Communication Strategies, an award-winning public relations and public affairs firm headquartered in Nashville, Tennessee. Thank you for joining us.